presentation of the techniques and principles of auditing. The presentation will cover the competences that are expected of you candidates as you answer the exams. It will also cover certain things that you may not have seen or concentrated on as regards the syllabus. So we are trying to make the passing of this particular exam a little more easier and allow more candidates to excel at the next level. I'll begin by looking at the expected competences that you candidates are expected of. The competences are outlined in the syllabus, and the syllabus chapters, especially the first few pages, you'll be able to see competences that you require. There are 8 competences in total, and these competences actually match with the syllabus. For instance, competent number 1, it's explaining the purpose and context of auditing, and this is exactly the first topic in your syllabus, and it goes on up to the last topic, which is topic 8. And then the common mistakes that are observed frequently in the exam is that some of the candidates fail to understand the competencies that are there. A competence is basically an outcome or what you need to show after you study the syllabus. So, for instance, a competence that will require you to explain doesn't require you to state, because explaining means you have to give a reason and stating. So the next common mistake could be the failure to identify the topics that are in the syllabus. Most of the candidates want to study the entire syllabus from topic 1 to the last topic. But if you ask them how many topics are there, so it's very important that you are able to itemize and be able to give specific topics as outlined in the syllabus. And the second mistake could be the failure of the candidates to link the learning outcomes and the topic objectives. This is very crucial because the examinations are based on the learning outcomes, and even the questions themselves will actually carry the same verbs that we find in the learning outcomes. And possibly also the failure for the candidates to stick to time. The examination is 3 hours, so that means you are expected to move at the rate of 1.8 minutes per mark. That is 180 minutes divided by 100 marks. So in other words, if you follow that particular time again, you won't be able to finish the exam because you'll have moved at the same pace with the invigilator. So the best space or pace to move is actually 1 minute per 1 mark. That means if a question carries 5 marks, the average number of minutes to move should actually be the same. That is 5 minutes per every 5 mark question. And the other common mistake that candidates make is failure to distinguish the questions themselves. Some of the questions have to do with recalling, simply remembering what you read in your textbook. And some of the questions require you to apply the scenario or content in the question. Recall type of questions simply ask you to list, state, and a few others could be explanation. And most of these questions are not even loaded that much. They are actually with a simple background question, and then there will be a series of questions to do. And the next common mistake is poor presentation of the answers. And most candidates think that because it is auditing, you can write anything without, for instance, putting good paragraph, commas where they're supposed to be. And in some cases, you find that some of the answers that are presented fall below the average requirement for the sake of probably grammatical errors, and some of them don't even have a paragraph. You'd imagine reading 1 page without breaking or paragraphs. It becomes quite boring. And then the other common mistake is failure to distinguish between the roles of the auditor and that of management. Auditors must be regarded as external people that have been invited or nominated to sit and verify on what goes on in the financial statements. So it's very important that the auditor doesn't behave as if he's the one preparing the financial statements. So in your answering, you must be able to bring out the kind of words that will show a distinction between what the auditor is doing and that which is to verify or investigate or to try and ascertain the worthiness of information in the financial statements. And then again, show certain words that would mean now you are talking of management. For instance, you should not say the auditor should ensure, well then that is the work of management. Probably you should say the auditor should consider whether, or they should verify information as contained in the financial statements. And other common mistakes are lack of understanding of audit procedure. The questions, most of them have to do with audit procedures. In other words, these are techniques and skills that the auditors use when to try to come up with some kind of evidence. I'll then move on to the technical aspects of the subject itself. The syllabus for the Principles of Auditing is basically a technical course content, meaning that we have standards as well that we use. If you look at financial reporting, it is actually endowed with a lot of standards. Almost every element in the financial statement is covered by a standard. It goes the same way with auditing. In fact, you're supposed to first of all learn the concepts in financial reporting before you migrate to the audit exam. And hence, it's advisable that first of all, candidates have to do financial accounting papers before you come to the audit exams. So for accounting, we have IS, for instance, as well as IFRS, while for auditing, we have the ISAs. So the ISA, the ISA, International Standards of Auditing, checks on the international accounting standards. So for technical purposes, we have certain terminologies that are supposed to be used, and those terminologies will always be preserved. For instance, you get to hear words like true and fair, assertions, modifications, emphasis of matter paragraphs, and all these. These are technical terms that could make you pass the exam as long as you can embrace and know what they mean. I'll then move on to the use of certain verbs which are critical for questioning. The verbs must be paid attention to because they tell us exactly what we need to do. So it's an instruction word. When you are told to define, the examiner is looking for what the meaning is of the term given before you. You're not supposed to describe, because the description will leave an impression that is different from what a definition can be. For instance, if you are told to state, like I said, state is simply listing. So you can put up a list of items that you are trying to give to the examiner. For instance, if a question says state and explain, again, this is another area that you need to know. The state and explain, it means the question has two kinds of verbs. Stating, meaning that you have to list something and then explain that which you've listed. Marks are allocated for stating as well as for explanation. And hence you find if you go through the examiner's reports, you'd find some people have only stated, meaning they would lose the marks for the explanation. So these kind of questions are normally referred to as composite questions. They state and they explain. So you lose marks if you just pay attention to one particular verb. So next time you're writing an audit paper, please pay attention to what kind of questions have been given to you in the exam. And then questions like describe, a description should be one that gives the actual characteristics of a particular item that you're asked to describe. A description does not give reasons. But you find that most people, when they are told to describe, they will start explaining the reasons behind the statements that have been given. For instance, if it says describe a management expert, we expect you to bring out the roles of this particular expert, and at the end of the day, someone should be able to appreciate that you've actually left an impression of what work the expert does. Again, certain questions will begin with identify. The question that begins with identify, it simply means the information is actually contained in the scenario. Your task is to pick that information and then relate it to the question that you've been asked. But you find that some people, when they are asked to, or candidates, when they're asked to identify, they begin to repeat what they learned or what they read in the textbook. It doesn't help. So the best you can do is look for the information that is contained in the scenario, because that's what the examiner wants you to do. And when you bring out this information, it must actually relate to what is in the scenario. So there must be that contact between your answers and the information given to you. Questions that have to do with illustrations. How you handle such questions or such kind of verbs, it means you explain and then try to give a concrete example of information that you've been asked to do. Because an illustration would actually, first of all, you define within the illustrations, you can explain. Then lastly, you show an example. Do not begin with an example. For instance, someone beginning a question or the answer that, for example, it simply shows you do not know what you're talking about. Because you can't give an example without explaining that particular concept first. Again, certain verbs that we normally encounter in the exam are compare. Though this is a higher verb, it means you have to contrast or compare one particular concept given to you to another concept. Just like distinguishing and contrasting. These are more or less the same. And you also have questions where you are asked to recommend or suggest. And normally, if there's a weakness in the system, we normally get such kind of questions. So what else can you bring to the question or to the exam of your own opinion outside the textbook? So you cannot recommend what is already in the textbook. The recommendation has to come from your own learning and experiences that you have encountered from the environment. And then we also have other examination techniques that I would like you to be reminded of. Sometimes you find candidates who spend a lot of time on one particular point, developing and expanding the same point. Examiners are very particular about repeating points. So as you write your answers, be able to reflect back. Read your answers again and see if you have repeated yourself. Because you could have just been talking about the same thing, finishing paragraphs and pages and so on. Then again, you must be able to run away from certain terms. Certain technical terms could be a problem to expand on. Try to go for easy explanations because you are trying to convey the same idea to the examiner. And then we have questions in auditing. Most of the questions that you've seen today or compared to the past exams, they have to do with the scenarios. Zika has stopped examining where you're simply given question 1, A, B, C, D, straight away. So there'll be background information, and this information mainly captures and explains the contents in the syllabus and the topics. There's no scenario that will carry a story that does not connect the question. So most of the questions are simply phrasing or rephrased contents of the same topics. So if you've read the topics, the topic will actually be depicted in form of a story. These stories, as you call them, most of you, they are basically contents of the background information. And if, for instance, you're given a question on threats that the auditors face, these threats will be mentioned in the scenario. You don't have to look elsewhere from the textbook. Anything that would be an answer departing away from content from the scenario doesn't score you any marks at all. And the second technique you should always apply in the exam is, of course, practicing examination questions. Normally we do this before the exam because you can't practice the questions in the exam. The questions that you practice should not be taken as material that will come in the exam. The practicing of questions simply relates to your ability to finish the requirements in a given time and also to try and see if what you learned can be related to or you can answer it correctly. The common mistakes again on question spotting is where candidates pick the question paper and begin to say, this came, this will not come, this was stated last year. So the past questions themselves do not reflect what you are going to see in the exam. And it's very important that, first of all, you study the syllabus contents, and then you relate your study material to the questions before you. Otherwise, answering past questions is simply trying to prove whether you read the material or you didn't. And again, selecting the questions, it's very critical that when you select questions, you are not selecting topics. Simply because the questions carry multiple topics. For instance, if you are given question 1, you're not expected that question 1 will come from the first topic or the last topic. Each particular question has sub-questions. For instance, question 1 could have topic 1, context in auditing. It may have audit evidence. It may also have reporting. And this means that those that have mastered the topics as single topics may not excel. Because you find question 1 is topic 8. Question 2 is topic 5. Examiners are free as long as they can meet the needs of the requirement in terms of question weighting or question marks. Now let's try to move on to some practical questions that have been set in the past. For instance, this particular question was adapted from Zika paper 2014. If I'm not mistaken, it should be a March exam of 2014. The question basically had brought out recall type of verbs. But of course, the first part A of the question had to do with discussing the reasons. I'll not read the last part of the question, but I want you to look at the actual verbs, because once you get the verbs, it will be easy for you then to structure your answer that meets those actual verbs. A says, discuss the reasons why a stock exchange such as Lusaka Stock Exchange requires company to be listed. The rest of the words in the question are simply trying to make the question clear. They don't add anything to your answers. But the most important thing is, are you able to discuss the reasons why a company should be listed? So when discussing again, you need to bring out the pros and cons. It's like on a table you are seated with your party or in a debate. There will be those that you'll be arguing against and those that you'll be arguing for. So as you answer this kind of a question, when you say discuss the reasons, you must be able to, for instance, begin with what you can agree with the statement. Do you agree that a company should be listed on the stock exchange, and why? And again, at some point, you must be able to draw the examiner to the opposite of what you're trying to discuss, meaning that you can talk about for, and then you bring out the differences. A discussion is not a one-sided kind of explanation. And then part B, explaining why, meaning that there's a reason that is needed to be given. An explanation always requires a reason. So each time you come across a question that says explain, you must be able to give reasons why. Just like when someone says explain why you are late, I don't think somebody will begin by listing 1, I did this, B. Somebody's looking for the reasons why the companies are listed. And then part B, of course, there's explain, and even parts of the questions, they have to do with explaining. And then the other part has to do with the differences. Now, in such kind of a question, how do you make sure that your answers relate to what the examiner has? And that's the biggest challenge, because you must try by all means to match your answers with what the examiner's possible solutions are. So you can only put up an answer that looks like what the examiner wants if you can meet the requirements of the question. Questions that begin with discuss, That means the examiner's answers are phrased in the manner, the meaning of the way discussion is. So you're not supposed to begin to wander to go away from the requirement of the questions. The other question was explaining why companies are listed. Like I said, the question why demands the reasons. Let's go to topic 2, that's corporate governance and code of ethics. In this particular part of presentation, like I began with topic 1, we are trying to look at certain questions that have been asked per topic and possibly bringing out the verbs that are commonly used on these particular topics. You can be given, for instance, recall type of questions. So in an exam, be ready to encounter 2 things. 1, there will be an application kind of questions. This is where I given the scenario, as well as when you just need to recall or remember what you read. And for questions like corporate governance, it's either you are given a scenario with a lot of weaknesses, possibly a badly governed firm. And then, or you can be given a question, for instance, in this particular case, it was just a question of recalling what you read. Meaning that at least you must be able to bring out information that is from the textbook, and of course you can add on certain explanation that will make the answer much more complete. And the third topic, of course, is internal audit. Like I said at the beginning, every competence has its topic matched with it. For instance, competence number 3 has outcomes that will help you to get the actual verbs. So actually, you can even predetermine at some point what kind of verbs will be used for each particular topic. So if a question is going to come on internal audits, what verbs are there? Topic 3, internal audit, begins with the verbs. So you can even predict to some extent, though I'm not saying that you can actually predict what the question would be, but certainly you can predict how the question is going to begin. So if the learning outcome was explain the purpose, it simply means that explanation has been dealt with in this topic itself, and then the question itself has to begin with explaining. So basically internal audits have to do with, these are employees of the company in an accounts department, and they're in charge of ensuring that the internal systems are working efficiently and effectively. So a good answer would actually go for reasons if the question says explain. Then let's move on to topic 4. This topic has to do with audit planning and documentation. And once again, I'm going to relate to questions that have been asked on this particular topic. And that has to do with the audit planning side of it. You should know that there are 2 kinds of plans. Of course, there will be a strategy as well as the actual audit plan. Materiality also broken down into performance as well as the actual materiality that we do in accounts. But it's very important that you do not show the materiality ranges. Remember, there are those figures in this particular topic where you are told the levels of limits beyond which a material misstatement may be regarded to be grave. It's also very important that you also look at the internal controls. Internal controls is basically a very common topic that you encounter in the exam. And almost every paper that you pick, every exam that you pick will have at least a system. So the internal controls you talk about are those actual controls in each particular system. And there are so many systems to expect in the exam. There are the systems that we have. We've got the sales system, we have the purchasing system, the wages, the cash receipts, the payments, as well as inventory. Now, why are these called systems? We can interchange the word internal control for systems as well. They are known as systems because they accept input from the environment as well as the channeling or trying to process the input into the outputs. For instance, there will be orders for sales. Orders have to be processed. And then, of course, the dispatch comes at the end of it. So within the processes of recording the sales, there will be certain lapses that will be there, or weaknesses. And these weaknesses can actually result into fraud or errors, as well as the misstatements. So most of the systems thrive on 3 factors. The first one is identifying the weaknesses in the system. And the second question, has to do with the suggesting the controls. And then the auditor comes to test the controls. So even if a question on the system has 3 parts, that is A, identify the weaknesses, B, controls, and C, the test of controls, it is very cardinal that you structure your answer in form of a table and be able to relate that the first part of your answer will actually help you to answer part B. So if there's a weakness that has been mentioned, we must be able to suggest the kind of control that will be there. And then the auditor comes to do the testing. But the common mistakes that you find is that someone will suggest a very good, or they will identify a very good weakness, but then the suggestion or suggested control is completely different. Worse still, the test of controls, they will try to explain as if it was management. So be able to understand that the test of control will actually be the work of the external auditors. So again, you have to change your language. You don't have to say the auditor should ensure, because then that is acting as if you are in management. You certainly score very good marks on this particular topic if you try to make sure that part A relates to part B relates to C. And again, avoid question spotting. The fact that you said in every exam there will be a system, it does not mean that when the sales system was tested last year, and therefore I should now concentrate on the purchases system. Topics in the exam can repeat. Actually, the entire exam, the topics that have been set before are the same topics that will be set. What differs are the kind of questions, structures that come on every particular topic. So it doesn't help to master to say the sales came, so I'll go for inventory and the payroll and so on. And the worst part is on the cash system, I would like to emphasize one particular point. The cash system consists of 2 parts. It's like a cash book. There's a debit side, so you can have a system simply on the receipt side, as well as the payment side. So in the exam, you'll be able to see that some of the systems on the cash system, they are purely on the payment side. But the structure and logic of how the questions are structured is the same. We intend to look at the weaknesses, then there will be controls, and then testing the controls. But of course, as you saw in the last exam, there was a question that looked at the strengths of systems. So possibly there was a departure from the weakness, and those that always wanted to see weaknesses were caught on the wrong foot. Because sometimes the system could be weak, we can suggest the strengths. Or the system can be strong, and then you are asked to identify what particular strengths are there in this particular system. The solutions, like I said, you need to structure in a table form. That helps a lot. One, it helps you, the candidate, to logically structure your answers. And the second thing, it also helps the people who look at your scripts, because they'll be able to follow the chronological order in which you've arranged your materials.
Take your career prospects to the next level with Zika.
Our diploma in accountancy is an essential qualification if you're planning on entering the accounting profession.
The Zika tax program at both certificate and diploma level equips you with an enhanced understanding of the field of taxation.
Our diploma in public sector financial management is ideal for accountants or trainee accountants working in the public sector.
And CA Zambia, a respected designation designed to ensure that graduates are highly trained to hold senior positions in the workplace.
You can study through flexible options like self-study, as well as part-time or full-time through our accredited tuition providers.
Zika sponsors the top CA Zambia graduate to the One Young World Summit for Young Leaders and also offers scholarships to the top university accountancy graduates from recognized universities.
Visit zika.co.zm now for more information or find us on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Don't delay, your future awaits.
Then the topic 6, that is audit evidence techniques. So audit evidence are basically the materials you obtain from the client, the financial statements, the cash book. In short, what can you bring to the table that you got from the client premises or records? To try and get this information, there are techniques that have been designed. Again, these techniques are not from your head or from yourself as a candidate. The techniques have been mentioned in the standard, that is ISA 500. When a question begins with a standard, and you should take this very serious, some of the topics will plainly begin without no reference to a standard. But if a question says ISA 500, there's something that should ring in your mind. Did you come across ISA 500? Did you read it? Because your answers must be actually from the same ISA 500. So the techniques for gathering audit evidence, that's an analytical procedure. This is the one that you use in financial reporting, analyzing the financial statements, looking at the trends. So as auditors, you're also supposed to look at information movement. Like last year's, the margin was 40%. Why is it that it has gone up to 80% and so on? Then inquiries. That's another technique you can use to obtain audit evidence. An inquiry is simply a series of questions. Now, questions that you ask are those that bring out information that you need. And then inspections as well. Inspection is one of the audit techniques for obtaining audit evidence, because what you are inspecting, when you go to observe or look at the records, you may find some kind of disparities. And then observations. Of course, if you are trying to gather audit evidence using observation, it must be one where you are physically present. So you cannot observe the financial statement that were prepared in the past. So you must be very careful if you are asked to explain certain audit techniques when gathering evidence. So we normally use observation for stock-taking counts, because you need to review the count instructions, attend, and then look at the instructions being followed or steps being undertaken by the respective workers from our clients. And I would go to topic 6, looking at a few questions that have been set on topic 6. Now you notice that as you move from the first topics, even the level of questioning verbs also tends to increase in terms of detail. The first topics, most verbs questioning verbs you encounter have to do with explain, state, outline. But as you move towards the reporting or before reviewing, the verbs tend to change a bit. We now begin to look at verbs like describe. Of course, if you are going to describe, your answer must leave an impression for somebody who was not there to appreciate what you described. Just like if you are trying to describe content in the house, of course, you'll be able to mention things that are physically present in that particular house. So a description should leave an impression of characteristics of the items or things that you're describing. If a question says, describe substantive audit procedures, especially for topic 6 and topic 7, you must be able, first of all, to understand what do they mean by substantive audit procedure. Because you can't just be describing what you don't know. A substantive procedure is one that brings out some relationship between materials you are seeing as well as the confirmation from outside. It must be one that will bring out some material misstatements. And then you have verbs like describe, list, and explain. Again, I should mention, for certain topics that we have in auditing, the outcomes themselves are going to be composite type. So for instance, you may be asked to list and explain. It's very important that you look at what kind of answers we bring out. You'd find that listing is just itemizing, say 1, 2, 3, 4. An explanation is giving a reason. So in this case, the question has two requirements. The first requirement is a list, and the next is an explanation. But you find the candidates who dwell either on explaining only, or they'll spend most of their time simply listing. It doesn't help. It simply means the examiner has answers for listing and some marks allocated for explanation. But you must be able to weigh the content of material that you present. If you look at the marks given, the marks are 5 marks for this particular question on topic C, part C, for illustrations. It says list and explain. Of course, you don't need to cover 10 points. Common sense will tell you that there are 5 marks. So at least there will be 5 items listed at most, and those 5 items listed must be explained, not in detail, because you got 5 marks. There's no extra mark given for over-explaining or offloading everything you know about certain questions. So again, we'll be having the questioning verbs repeating almost in every question. And these are some of the things that you may not find as defined in the textbook, and that is why we are sharing this kind of information with you. For topic 7, that is audit evidence, specific areas. Again, the topic of audit evidence is quite vast, but certain areas can be specified. And some of these areas are what you learn in financial reporting. So what evidence are we looking for in specific areas? We are looking for the areas where we have what you call elements of financial statements. Those are specific areas. For instance, receivables, payables, non-current assets, and these are going to be specific balances. When it comes to specific areas, you have to think of information contained in the financial statements. So want to verify, because a client could have information in the financial statement, well written there, but which doesn't actually exist. So I'll try to demonstrate a few verbs that would help us answer questions to do with topic 7. Possibly just to begin this one, you need to confirm that is receivable balances by comparing information on the books as well as what is coming from the debtors out there. So for payables, the substantive procedure is mainly the confirmations, just like for receivables as well. But to answer this particular kind of questions, you must have in mind what you call assertions. So please, if you are going to answer questions on substantive procedure, you have to try to go back and look at what is known as the assertions. Assertions are simply what is hidden behind the financial statements. When management is giving you the financial statements, they are saying the figures are accurate. They are also indicating that information is correct. They are also showing that what is in the financial statement actually exists. It is not fictitious. So your work as an auditor should be able to verify whether these figures are actually correct. If a transaction occurred, did it really occur? So how do you verify if something occurred? So behind questions like substantive procedures, you need to go back and look at what assertions are. For instance, if a figure is mentioned, there is cash balance 2,000 kwacha. The first question is is this money even in the bank? So if it is in the bank, how do I verify that it's there? Once you begin to ask information like that, you'll be able to trace how to locate that particular value. So for instance, if it is there, does it exist? I can ask for a bank statement, and then I'll try to review the bank statement. Possibly, I can also ask for statements from the bank manager. Then I'll compare information coming from the bank manager as well as the information given to me by my client. If something occurred as an assertion, how do we know that something occurred? Occurrence. Occurrence is evidenced by documentation. So if a transaction like purchases occur, somebody must have pushed in a requisition for the purchase, invoices must have been given, and later on, these must have been tabled and recorded in the books of accounts. So once again, specific areas in the syllabus for audit evidence, you must have in mind figures that are presented in the financial statements. Of course, there will be confirmation, which can be a positive confirmation as well as negative for the sake of receivables as well as the payables. And then the last topic that I would like to look at is review and reporting. This is what the shareholders expect. With every audit, there must be some outcome, and everybody is waiting for the report. It's like when there's a commission of inquiry, there will be an investigation going on. And that's the same thing that goes on for auditing. So the evidence you gathered has been analyzed, and you are now about to prepare a report. There will be opinions that will be reflected in the financial statement. The first part is to review. So you go through whatever you audited in the past 1 year. Now, for the sake of questioning, the reviews that we have to do with 3 parts. You review the going concern. So there are materials or there are topics, these 3, going concern, subsequent events, as well as actual reporting in the syllabus as well. So as a candidate, you must know which information do you need to review if a company is going to be regarded as not a going concern or a going concern. Again, on this particular part, I would like to spend a bit of time because this is an area that confuses candidates every year in the exam. Now, how do you know how others fared on this particular topic? You have to read the examiner's reports, because the examiner's reports reflect the anguish, the lamentations, or what the examiners want to see going forward for the sake of progress. The going concern concept has to be what management expresses. So there are certain circumstances that management will try to, either they will hide that the company is not a going concern, or they will try to give a situation which is quite false. So out there, we need to look at circumstances, and the syllabus is very clear. They have given 4 scenarios for going concern. These, we can call them situations. And for every situation, there is a kind of opinion given. Again, there are so many opinions that are available. For the sake of this presentation, I would like you to begin studying this particular part of the syllabus with the reporting. If you look at topic 8, it is structured in the way that first of all you have reviews, and then you got going concern, and then reporting. I would urge you to begin with the reporting. Sometimes you don't need to follow the syllabus chronologically. Why do I want you to begin with reporting? The terms that are used in the reporting part of the topic 8, those terminologies will require you to comprehend or use them in going concern as well as the subsequent events. For instance, the terms unmodified opinion as well as a modified opinion. you discover that if you just follow the topic 8, the way the content is arranged, you end up missing a point or two, or you are going to encounter some difficulties. So I would urge that first of all you look at, you read the reporting part, which is the last part of the syllabus, and then you go back to subsequent events as well as the going concern. What comes out in the reports are mainly the terminologies. Now, as a candidate, you must not look at material, for instance, that was examined some 5-6 years ago, because the reporting contents have been revised. And hence, if you look at the syllabus for DA11, even 2.3, and other papers as well, the actual report paragraphs have been rephrased and realigned, such that as you write the exam, if you're going to answer a question on this particular topic, you must have read the latest versions of the revised ISA 700 as well as ISA 705. So the contents begin with the report itself. What is the first paragraph? It's like a letter. What do you begin with? So there will be those, the title, the address, but you'd find that candidates will try to rewrite the old report that is no longer in use. So you end up presenting an answer which is completely different from what the examiner wants, because you're expected to read the latest books that reflect the latest content. So there has been some rearrangement of the syllabus contents or the topics on this particular, especially the parts on this particular topic, should I say. So there have been some new inclusions as well. So reporting can be less challenging if you can begin by looking at the terms by definitions of what goes on in the report. It is also important for topic H to even count the number of paragraphs that are in the reports. What should be the first paragraph and what should be the last? Because you can be given a question on this particular part where the report has been given, where the paragraphs have been rearranged. For instance, paragraph 2 of the report is sitting or appearing on the last paragraph. Now, if you never knew or you never read the current revised standard, you'd be at pains to rearrange or identify some weaknesses in the report. And again, on the same topic 8, review and reporting, you'd find that sometimes you are given the actual opinions that were actually wrong. The examiner for this particular paper, including Zika, they've made matters very easy in the sense that they have given the actual, or they have matched the circumstance and what kind of opinion must be given. So more or less like you have one particular problem and they have given you the kind of solution that you require. So for purpose of time, I'll try and give just an example on this particular question. For instance, if the question says, or the question says, explain the differences between unmodified and a modified opinion. First and foremost, in reporting, if the report is unmodified, it simply means there's truthfulness as well as the fairness. So to say, management has not been biased and they have done their work according to applicable accounting standards. Now, where does the modification comes in? The modification is a departure or moving away from the standard or from the truth. For instance, if there are mistakes in the financial statements, we are going to modify our opinion. We are going to express our opinion, which is going to highlight certain exceptions within the evidence that we've gathered from management. So the degree of misstatement, again, these are terms like I said at the beginning. Auditing is a technical course. So if you say there's a misstatement, it could mean a figure has been over-added or under-added, or some figures have been omitted from the financial statements. But the question is, what effect does this misstatement has on the financial statement? How does it impair the user decisions from the financial statement? So the degree of misstatement, we normally call it pervasiveness. These are terms you'd find, or you always find in this topic, topic 8. Pervasiveness simply means the degree of misstatement. To what extent can we say this statement is so damaging that we can't trust the financial statement? But you find that if the mistake is not very much of a worry, we would say the audit opinion will be modified except for a few things. For instance, you'd say the misstatement is material but not pervasive. Or would say the misstatement is both material and pervasive. So if you're going to say the misstatement was material but not pervasive, we call that opinion a qualified opinion. Where the misstatement appears to be too grave, or where the misstatement is is of significance, we'll say the misstatement was both material and pervasive. So in that particular case, we are going to issue an adverse opinion. So again, you should know what kind of opinions are there in auditing, reporting, and when do we use these opinions. So the common mistake is where you find the student who give a wrong opinion for a wrong misstatement. Or they will have the correct misstatement, but then they will give the wrong opinion. I would also look at the other important parts in understanding the principles of auditing, because you can only do better if you can understand certain aspects that will make you answer the questions well. The common things that students face as troubling in the exam are assertions. And you often find someone is going to ask you, what do you mean by the term assertion? Can I see an assertion? These are things that you cannot see, but you normally want to use them to prove what management has done with the figures that have been given in the financial statement. And as I go towards the conclusion of my presentation, I would like you to reflect on what we said at the beginning, that there will always be a link between the learning outcome, topic objective, as well as the questioning verbs. So there are 3 kinds of areas you should concern yourself with. Before you go to the next topic, have you understood what you are expected to do? Because the learning outcome is asking you to show what you learned or mastered in the topic or in the syllabus part. The topic will carry an objective which is slightly shorter. Actually, it simply means the learning outcome has been now reduced to something less. And then the questioning verbs. So it's very important that you always have to know that there will always be a link, which is a connection between the learning outcomes. There are those 8 that we talked about. Each learning outcome is linked to a particular topic, and each particular topic objective is linked to the questioning verb. So as we study auditing, I know we are mostly interested in the content, the material, the knowledge, and all that. But it's very fundamental that we actually go slightly back and look at what are the questioning verbs on each particular topic. And I think you'd find it very easy compared to other subjects. I'm not trying to say other subjects do not show that. I don't think there's a course where, first of all, they tell you what question verb they are going to use in the exam. But auditing does that. The learning outcome begins with the actual verb. And these are the same verbs you expect to find where? in the exam. So there'll be no mismatch between the actual questioning verb as well as it. So that's the link you need to always carry with you. And in summary, I would like you to remind you of some very important things that you've gone through our presentation. And the first thing is that we should understand the topics that are in the syllabus. These topics are arranged chronologically. Topic 1 feeds into topic 2. For you to go to topic 3, you must comprehend topic 2. And topic 8 is the last one, which is basically an output from our evidence that we've gathered. So you cannot study the subject of auditing beginning with the report. Because how do you give a report before you gather and analyze your evidence? Again, the topics must not be studied in isolation. The examiner is free. For instance, question 2 can have 6 topics. I think if you compare other subjects, you find that possibly you can master, like mathematics. You can master a topic and maybe it will come as a single question. But for audit exam, you'd find that A could be topic 1, part B, topic 6, part 6 or part 3 could be topic 8, and so forth and so on. So if you specialized, and that's a danger again, question spotting. If you specialize that question 8 came and only master question or topic 5, you get stuck. Unless you find someone who only attempt part A, then they'll leave B, C. When they come to the result, they don't get actually a pass mark. And the second thing which we've looked at is basically understanding the expected outcome. So as a candidate, what is it that you are supposed to show into the exam that you learned? Because the exam is simply trying to ask you to reflect on what you learned. So if you did not know the outcomes from your syllabus content, it will be difficult for you to pass this particular exam. So as you can see, the audit exam comes with extra burden. It's not just swallowing, so for the lack of a better term, or gadgetating, or memorizing everything that is in the textbook. We are given extra burden, such as grammatical comprehension, spelling, logical presentation, because these ideas, if you are going to spell the word wrongly, it may give a different meaning to the examiner. So correct spellings should be the ones to use in the exam. Otherwise, you'll be presenting your correct ideas, but they're actually phrased wrongly. And then the command words, which you said you should be using. Command words are verbs. Most of these verbs are there for you to read. You can actually know some of those from, even from the dictionary. And then please try to practice standard questions. The practicing of exam question does not mean you are practicing what exactly is going to come in the exam. Unfortunately for this particular paper, you'd mostly see that possibly the last exam may have nothing to do with the previous exam. But the actual material topics are actually repeated, except what comes on every topic is quite different. And that's why you should always search for information in every part of the corner of the syllabus. Do not regard as material, some of it is very important. You skip a paragraph when you're studying, who knows? That's where maybe the marks are going to come from. And then the next thing we've looked at is the standards. Oftentimes, students like asking, do I need to memorize the standards? The standards in auditing are not supposed to be memorized, but the standards give you the guide of what is on each particular topic. And almost every topic in this particular exam is actually a standard. And most of us are disregarding that particular fact. For instance, topic 7, topic 8, all these are derived from the standards. Do not memorize the actual words or caption of the standard, but the content on every standard must be studied. And then, like we said, it's packaging. You can have very good ideas, you have read the syllabus, you have the knowledge, but then how do you package your answers? Examiners are also looking at good presentation, good command of English language. So practice how to write good essays, because these are required for you to convey good meanings in auditing as well. And always practice regularly for you to achieve the best marks in the exam. Leave enough time, because you need to go through your work just in case you misspelled or you made a mistake in your writing. I thank you, and please, for any consultations, you are free to consult Zika.